The purpose of this project is to introduce a high-performance culture into Lafarge Wholesome. That's the purpose. And how are we going to do this? Well, the first thing we've done is we've appointed 40 RISE ambassadors. There is a small wrinkle in that people don't know, the ambassadors don't yet necessarily know what RISE means. So in order to inculcate this culture throughout the organization, the first thing we did is People Smart ran a workshop back in March, and these 40 RISE ambassadors came up with a 3-step plan to change the business, and that was cost, customers, and people. So how do we reconcile cost, customers, and people and RISE? Well, what we say is RISE is how we do things, and cost, customers, and people is what we do. It doesn't matter what we do, it will always come under the umbrella, if you like, of RISE. RISE is resilience, integrity, safety, and engagement. If we're going to introduce a culture into the business, what's the best way of doing that? The best way of doing that is to change the conversation. That's the best way of doing it. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to have a 3-day workshop. This is going to be the outline of the 2-day workshop, and then there'll be a 3rd day at the end. I'll explain in a moment. What are the outcomes of this 2-day workshop? The outcomes is 40 people that are trained, that can go into the business and change the conversation. This means we have to give them something to train, some content to train, but we also have to understand how they understand this 4-letter acronym RISE, R-I-S-E. And so these 2 days are going to be 3 things really. The first thing is getting them skilled up in those 4 elements: resilience, integrity, safety, and engagement. The second thing is for them to understand very deeply what RISE means to them and to the organization. And thirdly is to give them the tools to go out and change the conversation. There are 2 main tools we're giving them. The first one is a curriculum, and the second one is an ability to speak in a motivational way. Let me show you how it works. In the first morning, obviously, we're going to do the icebreakers, get people to work together and to be a little bit vulnerable. And then we're going to start talking about what RISE means to them. And we're going to start writing what we call the RISE manifesto. A manifesto is a set of, 10, 15, 20 sentences that tells you what you believe and how you're going to implement those beliefs. That's what a manifesto is. So we're going to start talking about the RISE manifesto here. And throughout the day, in fact, we're going to start talking about that RISE manifesto, as well as the ability to speak in a motivational way. I'll tell you what that's like now. Straight after tea, we're going to talk about what did we chat about in April or March. And the reason we have to do that, bring in this cost, customers, and people, is because if we don't do that, then we're dropping the ball, and that is not what RISE does. RISE is about integrity, and integrity means that we're going to follow up and hold ourselves accountable. So we need to just follow up very briefly in half an hour just to understand where we're at with that process. Once we've done that, we can start talking about the first letter of RISE. And the first letter of RISE, funnily enough, is not R. The first letter of RISE that we're going to discuss is E, which is engagement. Why do we start with engagement? Simon Sinek says, you have to start with the why.
I always say that, there's if you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they work for you with blood and sweat and tears. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you talk about what you believe, you will attract those who believe what you believe.
All great companies start with why. And Daniel Pink and Dan Ariely have done a lot of work in this field. And they say that engagement is creating an emotional connection with work that we find meaningful. And so those are some of the tools that we're going to be giving our RISE ambassadors around engagement. And each of these things, each of these sessions will have some content, just as I've explained to you now, as well as some exercises to help them forge that connection, as well as a public speaking or a motivational speaking section. These people are going to learn, how do I persuade people, how do I motivate people, how do I get people to buy this message? I always say it's not called sell in, it is called buy in. And a coaching manager or a coaching leader needs to be able to deliver that message in a way that makes people want to buy in. And if we can do that, we can change the whole culture. Not only that, but if we can do that, the culture then becomes resilient. We'll talk about that in a moment. The culture then becomes resilient because it doesn't matter what happens in the culture. The people are skilled to take the information or the events that are occurring and then to speak about it in a motivating and uplifting way. So the first letter we're going to discuss is E, engagement. Then the next letter we're going to discuss is S. Do a little bit of engagement before lunch, a little bit of engagement after lunch, and then round about here in the late afternoon, mid-afternoon, we'll start with safety. Now, as you probably know, People Smart has got a complete zero harm program, so we have a lot of games, a lot of activities, a lot of information around safety. As we go through these exercises, two things are happening at the same time. Number one, we're going to update the manifesto. And number two, we're going to be updating the speeches. And underneath this manifesto, we're going to be talking about some of the images that we're going to be using. Actual pictures or images or graphics that are going to be created to start communicating this manifesto in a very clear way. After safety, we go into this day 2 of the morning. The morning of day 2, we start talking about I, integrity. If engagement is about an emotional connection to work that is meaningful, safety is about my own personal safety. And so what's in this for me and my family? I'm going to be kept safe at work. That's very important, obviously. On day 2 in the morning, we're going to start with integrity. Now, what's important about integrity is this is about the organization and its place in society, its place in Zambia. We've got lots of games and activities and information about this. In fact, there was a very interesting article just last year, an academic article written about Italian corruption and how to change that, and there's some very interesting research done around that. So we're going to be talking about integrity here. And then after we've done integrity, we'll update the manifesto again with the words and with the images, and we'll practice talking to people about integrity and speaking to people about how integrity is good for them. And then finally, we're going to talk about resilience. And resilience means the ability to cope with change, really. That's what it's about. And over here, we're going to be giving people the Holmes Ray stress inventory so that people can understand where the stresses are coming from and how to cope with those stresses. And once again, we'll be updating the imagery and we'll be updating the words of the manifesto, and we'll be practicing how to get people to buy into this manifesto. Now, there are a couple of subtleties that we haven't discussed yet around this program, which are very important. The first subtlety is that these 4 things, or 5 things actually, because there's RISE and then RISE, these 5 things, all talk about a risen entity. So, for example, engagement is about a risen Lafarge Holcim, a risen organization. Safety is about a risen individual. Integrity is about a risen Zambia, and resilience is about a risen team. So those are the 4 elements that we're talking about. That is what this culture change means. Everything is going to be rising. Secondly, as we discuss, the second subtlety that we're going to be talking about here is, as we discuss each of these letters of the alphabet, we're going to be giving people the tools and also a curriculum booklet. of 6 weeks worth of lessons around each of these letters, so that people can then take this booklet. It's a curriculum of 6 weeks, which is 40 days, and they can start training this content into the business so that this group becomes self-sufficient in terms of the RISE process. Now let's look at day 3. After day 2, we'll have 2 groups of 20 people that have gone some way in defining what the RISE manifesto could be. They've gone some way in deciding what imagery they're going to use. They've learned some tools and some knowledge and some techniques, and they've been exposed to the curriculum, the RISE curriculum. But now what? We've got 2 different groups, remember, and both may have a slightly different understanding of what RISE means to them and what RISE means to the organization. So day 3 is bringing it all together. Day 3 is this group of 40 needs to start planning how they are going to roll it out, because it's not People Smart rolling it out. It's Lafarge Wholesome rolling it out. Think about it. So in the morning, of course, there'll be an icebreaker to get people together. They will then present their RISE information, their RISE manifestos, their RISE images to each other, the 2 groups, and so that we will get some kind of common understanding. We'll have 2 groups at that point. There'll be group 1 and group 2, and they'll have their own ideas of what RISE means. And this session here is about coming up with a common set of images and a common approach to what RISE might mean and what the common manifesto is, so that both groups understand what RISE means to the whole organization. After that, we have to start getting really specific. Are we going to be doing posters? I think the answer to that is probably yes. But what else could we be doing? We could, for example, do t-shirts. We could do little brochures. We could do all sorts of things. That's a brochure, you know, one of those little Z-fold brochures. So we could do all sorts of little things around what RISE could be. We could do email campaigns, all little buttons for the shirts, embroidery, logos, all sorts of things. What has to happen here is these ambassadors have to decide what they're going to roll out in terms of imagery and understanding. What form is the manifesto going to take? Is it going to be a spiral-bound booklet? Is it going to be one of these brochures? Is it going to be a t-shirt? What is the manifesto going to be? Because it can be any or all of these things. And that's what this RISE group has to decide. And then finally, they have to also decide with this curriculum that we spoke about, how are they going to roll out their little RISE curriculum? Are they going to roll it out once a week, 1 letter per week? Are they going to roll it out at every toolbox meeting? In what order? How is it all going to work? And over here, we're going to talk about next steps and just get very concrete in terms of the action plans. Now, this is how it's worked. We've had group 1 for 2 days. We've had group 2 for 2 days. And then we bring everybody back on the Friday and we do day 3 with everybody to get a common understanding and a common rollout plan for the whole business. But that's not obviously where it ends, because we're going to have 40 days, and this 40 days, at least 3 times during that time, the ambassadors are going to meet. They're actually going to sit around a table, and they're going to have a meeting. Perhaps not all of them, but certainly there's going to be ambassadors sitting around a table. Why is that? Why do we need the ambassadors to meet? Because this forum, an hour every fortnight perhaps, will start giving us real-time feedback into what's happening on the ground at Lafarge Wholesome, how these messages are landing, how the people are changing the conversation and the culture. And it also gives us a way, as People Smart, of making sure that these ambassadors are actually doing what they're supposed to do. So it's a little bit of an accountability thing. the final very important reason these people need to meet is because this is quite a lonely job. If I've decided to give a piece of content to my team and they hate it, then I might feel a bit discouraged. So this is almost like a support group for the ambassadors to talk about what they're doing, what they could be doing, how they could be tweaking the program differently to be more effective. We will be on the telephone, of course, or on a Skype call, or on your Visio system. Whatever needs to happen, either before or during or after these ambassador sessions, these ambassador meetings. So to sum up, what have we got? Firstly, we have decided to implement RISE, resilience, integrity, safety and engagement across the whole business. We did preempt that slightly by going on a very concrete workshop to find out next steps of how we can change the business, and we came up with 3 of these priorities: customer, costs and people. But under these 3 things will be executed in the RISE way. So this is what we're doing, and RISE becomes the umbrella of how we do everything that we do. The next thing I did is I went through the 2-day session. We talked about engagement being an emotional connection to work that we find meaningful. We talked about safety, and PeopleSmart has got this zero harm program, which is values-based, not task-based or compliance-based. We talked about integrity, which is about Lafarge Wholesome as a whole and its role in Zambian society. And we talked about resilience, which is how do we handle change. And then we said, once we've gone through this with 2 different groups, they will have a manifesto. They will know what images they want to use. They will have a curriculum for 6 weeks of implementing these into the business. And then we will bring them together, and we will go through day 3, where we will take them through exactly the concrete next steps that will make this a reality. These are very, very full days. I really believe that this is the way we're going to do it. It's effective, and it's the most important thing for me is that we really are, to use that horrible English word, capacitating. We're enabling these people to do it themselves. They're not reliant on PeopleSmart. Certainly for the first 6 weeks, they should have enough to go on for those first 6 weeks. Then finally, the feedback loop will be closing. They'll be meeting 3 or 4 times during that time. We will be coaching them and mentoring them and hearing what they need, so that our following 3 40-day cycles are as effective as possible, and that Lafarge Wholesome gets the maximum value from this program. A little bit about me. And finally, you may want to know a little bit about me. My name is Eric Vigi, and I'm PeopleSmart's newest team member. Very proud to be here. I've been in this game of facilitating strategy sessions and helping change cultures for about 20 years now. I've worked in all sorts of different industries, most recently in the manufacturing industry. And one of my biggest successes was taking a 2,500 person organization over 2 years, taking it from 0 growth to 12% growth in the first year. And now 4 years later, even after I'm long gone, that organization is now 50% bigger than it was when I left. I'm very passionate about sustainable growth, and I believe it can be done. And through the years, me and my colleagues have developed a set of very, very reliable tools, and I'm very proud to be part of the PeopleSmart team, because this team really does know what they're talking about. I look forward to meeting you.